I drove 4 hours into the mountains specifically to escape the noise of other people, expecting the kind of silence you can feel in your teeth. Instead, I found a strange SUV crushing my gravel and cheap wind chimes clanging from eaves I had left bare. The porch lights were burning at noon. My key was still in my hand, but I knew it was useless. My sister had not just broken in, she had moved in. The winding road up to Pine Hollow was usually my decompression chamber. Every mile I put between myself and the glass-walled pressure cooker of Wexler and Rudd Advisory was a physical weight lifted off my chest. I had spent the last 3 weeks staring at spreadsheets that made my eyes burn, reconciling accounts for clients who had more money than sense and more panic than patience. It was the end of the quarter, a brutal ritual that always left me feeling hollowed out, like a pumpkin in November. I was 33 years old, and my knees ached from sitting in an ergonomic chair that cost more than my first car. All I wanted was silence. I wanted the specific, heavy silence of the Colorado mountains, where the only sound was the wind moving through the ponderosa pines and the occasional snap of a twig under the weight of a deer. I had bought the cabin 4 years ago, a small A-frame tucked away on a dead-end gravel road, specifically because it was unglamorous and hard to reach. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place in my life where I did not have to explain myself, where I did not have to manage anyone's expectations, and where I definitely did not have to audit anyone's spending. I downshifted as the pavement turned to dirt, my tires crunching over the familiar ruts. The air was crisp, smelling of pine resin and impending snow. Even though it was only October, I rolled down the window, letting the cold air sting my cheeks, trying to wake myself up. I was fantasizing about the bottle of Pinot Noir in the trunk and the book I had been saving for this exact moment. Then I rounded the final bend, and the fantasy evaporated. My cabin was supposed to be dark. I had left the thermostat at 55 degrees and the blinds drawn tight. Instead, the place was blazing like a lighthouse. Every window was glowing with warm, yellow light. The porch lights, which I strictly kept off to avoid light pollution, were beaming down onto the driveway. But it was the driveway itself that made my stomach turn over. Parked right in the center of my gravel turnaround, blocking the path to the garage, was a massive, pristine SUV. It was black, polished to a mirror shine, and looked completely out of place against the rustic backdrop of the woods. It looked like a vehicle that belonged in a suburban country club, not parked halfway up a mountain in Colorado. I pulled my Subaru in behind it, my headlights illuminating the back bumper. I did not recognize the car. My heart started to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A break-in? Squatters? I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening. The sound that reached me was not the wind, it was a melodic, metallic clinking. I stepped out of the car and looked up. Hanging from my eaves, right above the front door, was a set of massive wind chimes. They were copper and wood, the size of a small child. Swinging aggressively in the breeze, I hated wind chimes. I had never owned wind chimes. They were noise pollution disguised as decor. I gripped my keys in my hand, threading the jagged metal stem of my house key between my knuckles, a habit from living in the city. I walked up the wooden steps, my boots thumping loudly, announcing my arrival. I wanted whoever was inside to know I was coming. I wanted them to scramble. I reached for the door handle, fully expecting it to be locked, but it turned effortlessly in my hand. It was unlocked. In the middle of the woods, miles from the nearest neighbor, my front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, ready to scream, ready to fight. "Hey, who is in here?" I shouted, my voice cracking slightly from the adrenaline. The scene that greeted me was so domestic, so horrifyingly casual, that my brain took a full 5 seconds to process it. The cabin was warm, too warm. The thermostat had been cranked up to 75 degrees, but it was the smell that hit me first. It wasn't the smell of old wood and dust that I loved. It smelled distinctively of fresh latex paint and sautéing garlic. It smelled like a restaurant opening. "Allie, is that you?" A figure emerged from the hallway leading to the bedroom. It was my sister, Jenna. She was wearing a pair of silk pajama shorts and an oversized t-shirt that I recognized as one of mine from college. She was barefoot, holding a glass of wine, my wine, and she looked at me with a bewildered expression, as if I were the one who had broken in. "Jenna?" I lowered my hand, the keys jingling. "What are you doing here?" Jenna Foster was 36, 3 years older than me, but she had always possessed the energy of a chaotic teenager. She had the kind of beauty that required maintenance: highlighted blonde hair, perfect teeth, skin that glowed from expensive serums. Even now, in pajamas, she looked curated. "Oh my God, you scared me," she said, laughing breathlessly and placing a hand over her heart. "I did not expect you until the weekend. I thought you were working the quarter-end thingy." She stepped forward and wrapped me in a one-armed hug, smelling of expensive vanilla lotion and that garlic. I stood stiffly, my arms at my sides. "I am working the quarter-end thing," I said, my voice flat. "That is why I am here, to sleep." "Jenna, how did you get in? And whose car is that?" "The car? It is a rental," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Mark's truck is in the shop, and my sedan just cannot handle the incline up here. You know? The suspension is shot." She turned and walked back toward the main living area, acting like she was the hostess, and I was a slightly inconvenient guest. "And I got in with the key," she added over her shoulder. "The one under the rock." "I do not keep a key under a rock," I said, following her. "I stopped doing that 3 years ago." "Well, you must have left one somewhere," she said vaguely. "Or maybe Mark had one? I do not remember. Anyway, come in. Come in. Do not let the heat out." I walked fully into the living room, and the breath left my body. My cabin was a study in minimalism. I liked clean lines, neutral colors, and empty surfaces. It was the only way to calm my mind after looking at complex data all day. But the room before me was a disaster zone of clutter. There were throw pillows I had never seen before, bright orange and turquoise, scattered over my gray sofa. There were magazines fanned out on the coffee table, coasters that weren't mine, and a massive vase of fake flowers on the mantel. But that was just the surface noise. My eyes were drawn to the far wall, to the kitchen, or rather, where the kitchen used to be. I stopped dead. My bag slipped from my shoulder and hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Jenna," I whispered, "what did you do?" My kitchen, my small, perfectly functional, galley-style kitchen with the shaker cabinets I had installed 2 years ago, was gutted. The lower cabinets were gone, ripped out. The drywall was exposed, ragged and gray. The countertops, which were a durable quartz composite I had spent months selecting, were missing. In the middle of my living room, sitting on a drop cloth that was stained with plaster, was a giant, white porcelain farmhouse sink. It looked like a tombstone. Jenna took a sip of wine and followed my gaze, beaming. I know. It looks rough right now," she said, her voice bright and chipper. "But you have to visualize it. Alice, it is going to be stunning. That farmhouse sink is going to change your life. It opens up the whole space." "My life?" I choked out. "Jenna, where are my cabinets?" "Oh, the contractor hauled them away yesterday," she said. "They were dated. Allie, seriously, that oak finish was very 2010. I am doing you a massive favor. I got a great deal on these white matte ones, soft close hinges, the works. It is going to double the resale value of this place." My hands started to shake. I walked over to the edge of the kitchen, stepping over a roll of blue painter's tape. The destruction was violent. There were jagged holes in the wall where the backsplash had been pried off. The floor was covered in a thick layer of white dust that was already tracking onto my hardwood floors. "I did not ask for a renovation," I said, turning to face her. I felt a cold heat rising in my chest. "I did not ask you to double the resale value. I did not even ask you to be here." Jenna's smile faltered. Just for a second. She set her wine glass down on a stack of tile samples that were sitting on my dining table. "You are stressed," she said, her tone shifting to that soothing, patronizing register she used when we were kids, and she wanted to borrow money. I can tell. You have that vein popping out in your forehead. Look, I was going to surprise you. Mark and I, we needed some space. Things have been crazy with his business, and I just needed to get out of the house. I thought, why not come up to Alice's? She is never there. And then I saw the kitchen and I just thought, I can help her. I can do something nice. Nice? I gestured to the hole in the wall. Jenna, this is demolition. This is not nice. Who is doing this? Ridgeline Renovations, she said. Local guys, really solid. They started 2 days ago. 2 days. She had been here for at least 2 days. I turned away from her, needing to look at something that made sense. I walked toward the utility closet in the hallway. I kept it locked. It was where I stored the mundane but vital organs of the house. The water heater, the circuit breaker, and my emergency binder. The binder contained the deed to the property, my insurance policies, the original survey maps, and the receipts for every single repair I had ever done. The door to the utility closet was ajar. I pulled it open. The lock had not been forced. It had been opened with a key. My stomach dropped. I looked at the small folding table I kept inside the closet. The binder was gone. I spun around. Where is my binder? Jenna? She blinked, looking genuinely confused, or perhaps acting genuinely confused. What binder? The blue binder, the one with my legal documents. It was in this closet. Oh, that thing, she said, pointing toward the dining table, heavily obscured by the tile samples and a box of donuts. I had to look up the water shut-off valve location for the guys. It was in there. I marched over to the table and shoved the donuts aside. The binder was there, lying open. Papers were shuffled out of order. My insurance policy was pulled out, and lying right on top of the binder was a key ring. It was Jenna's key ring, a gaudy thing with a pink fluffy ball attached to it. And on that ring, sliding around next to her car fob, was a silver key, a copy of my utility key. Where did you get this? I picked up the keys, holding them up. I made a copy, she said, her voice dropping a little. Just for safety, Alice, you are being really intense right now. Can you just sit down? No, I cannot sit down, I snapped. You broke into my house, you destroyed my kitchen, and you went through my private legal documents. Why did you need the water shut off? The main valve is outside. You know that. There was water damage, Jenna blurted out. She took a step back, crossing her arms over her chest defensively. That is why I had to call Ridgeline. I came in and there was water everywhere. Under the sink. It was soaking the cabinets. They were ruined. Alice, I had to act fast before the mold set in. I was saving the cabin. I stared at her. Jenna was a terrible liar, mostly because she relied on emotion to cover the holes in her logic. Water damage, I repeated. I turned back to the kitchen ruin. I crouched down and shone the flashlight from my phone under the exposed pipes where the sink used to be. The subfloor was plywood. It was dusty. It was dry. There were no water stains. The wood was pale and pristine. I ran my hand over the pipes. There was no corrosion. No new fittings. Nothing to indicate a leak had been repaired. The cuts on the pipes were clean, made by a professional saw, not a burst. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust off my knees. There was no leak. Jenna. There was, she insisted, her voice rising to a pitch that hurt my ears. It dried up. The guys used fans, huge industrial fans. In 2 days? I asked. It dried so well that there is not even a water stain on the plywood? And instead of fixing a pipe, they ripped out the entire cabinetry system? Before she could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a sharp, double vibration, the specific haptic pattern I had set for my banking app. I pulled it out. A fraud alert was flashing on the screen. Chase Sapphire Reserve. Suspicious activity detected. Transaction of $4,250 at Summit Peak Home Supply. Transaction of $1,500 at Ridgeline Renovations. Did you make these purchases? The air left the room. I stared at the numbers. Almost $6,000. In one day. Jenna, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Did you use my card? She bit her lip, looking down at her bare feet. My card was maxed out, she mumbled. Just until next week. Mark has a transfer coming in, a big one, from the new investors. I just needed to put the deposit down to get the guys started. If I waited, we would have lost the slot on their schedule. I was going to pay you back as soon as the transfer cleared. You used my card, I said, the reality of it settling over me like a heavy blanket. The one in the desk drawer? I knew where you kept it, she said, shrugging as if this was a minor detail. Alice, stop looking at me like I stole from you. It is a loan. Family helps family. That is what we do. And look, I am managing the project for you. I am dealing with the contractors so you don't have to. I did not want a project, I yelled. The sound echoed in the small cabin, bouncing off the high ceilings. I did not want a farmhouse sink. I did not want debt. This is theft, Jenna. This is actual theft. Jenna's face crumpled. The transition from defensive to victim was instantaneous. Her eyes filled with tears, and her chin began to wobble. I am trying to do something nice, she sobbed. I am trying to help you, and you are treating me like a criminal. You have no idea what it is like for us right now. You sit in your fancy office with your salary and your bonuses, and you just judge everyone. Mark and I are struggling. Alice, we needed a win. We needed space. I just wanted to feel useful. I wanted to make this place nice for us, for the family. This is not your house, I said, trembling. It is my house. You are so selfish, she hissed, wiping a tear away aggressively. You have always been selfish. Mom always said you were cold. You see your sister in a crisis, and all you care about is your stupid cabinets. I closed my eyes. Taking a deep breath, I knew this tactic. It was the Foster maneuver. Attack the character to distract from the facts. If I engaged with the selfish accusation, we would spend 2 hours arguing about our childhood, and she would avoid talking about the $6,000. I am not doing this tonight, I said. Opening my eyes, I felt incredibly tired. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. I am going to bed. Tomorrow morning. You are packing your things, you are leaving, and you are going to call this contractor and cancel everything. I can't leave, she whispered. I can't go back there yet. That is not my problem right now, I said. You have until 10 in the morning. I walked past her, down the hall to the guest room, because my room, the master loft, was currently filled with boxes of tile. I went into the small room, shut the door, and locked it. I dragged a heavy wooden chair under the doorknob. It was a ridiculous, paranoid thing to do in my own home, but I did it anyway. I did not sleep. The mattress in the guest room was too soft, and the smell of garlic had seeped under the door. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the back door slide open. The screen door creaked. Jenna was going out onto the porch. I got out of bed and crept to the window. The window was open a crack to let in the cold air. I could hear her voice, low and urgent, drifting in from the deck. No, you do not understand. She is here. She came early. Pause. I am trying. Mark, I am handling it. I just need you to... No, don't say that. I pressed my ear closer to the glass. She sounded scared. Not the performative tears she had shown me earlier, but a genuine, tight-throated fear. Just buy me time, she whispered. Her voice was shaking. If you can just keep them off for another week. What did Caldwell say? Caldwell. The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it made the hair on my arms stand up. It was said with dread. Okay. I will figure it out. Just don't answer the phone if it's a blocked number. I love you. I heard the click of the call ending, then silence, then the sound of a lighter flicking, and the smell of cigarette smoke drifting into my window. Jenna had quit smoking 5 years ago. I went back to bed. But I didn't close my eyes. Caldwell, buy me time. This wasn't about a kitchen renovation. You don't renovate a kitchen to buy time. You renovate a kitchen to hide money, or to make money, or to pretend you have money. I finally dozed off as the sun was turning the sky gray. When I woke up, it was fully light. The silence in the cabin was absolute. I dressed quickly and went out into the living room. It was empty. The blankets on the sofa were folded. The clutter had been slightly organized. I walked into the kitchen. The coffee maker was cold. On the refrigerator, sticking to the stainless steel door, was a yellow sticky note. Allie, gone to town to get materials. Don't freak out. I handled it. We can talk about the money later. Love you. Jay. I ripped the note off the fridge and crumpled it in my fist. I handled it. That was Jenna's code for I made it worse. I turned to throw the paper away and saw the trash can. It was overflowing with takeout containers and debris. Resting right on top, half folded, was a piece of paper. It looked official. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a printed estimate from Ridgeline Renovations. I smoothed it out on the counter. It was dated 3 weeks ago. Client, Alice Foster. Project, kitchen overhaul, structural repair. Total estimate, $45,000. My eyes scanned to the bottom of the page. There was a signature line, authorized by Alice Foster, and there, in blue ink, was my signature. It was a good forgery. It had the sharp loop on the A and the flat line of the F that I used. If I hadn't known I didn't sign it, I might have believed it myself. She hadn't just used my card yesterday. She had been planning this for a month. She had impersonated me to a contractor, forged my signature on a legal contract, and committed me to $45,000 of debt. I looked at the sticky note in my hand. Don't freak out. I wasn't freaking out. I was freezing over. I reached for my phone, but this time, I wasn't checking my bank balance. I was searching for the number of the local credit union in town. Because if she had done this, she had done more. I grabbed my keys. I needed to go to Pine Hollow, and I needed to do it before Jenna came back. The drive down the mountain to Pine Hollow was usually a meditative experience for me. The switchbacks were tight, demanding focus, and the view of the valley floor opening up below, a patchwork of dark green pines and golden aspens, usually reminded me of why I worked so hard in the city. I paid for this view. I paid for the air that smelled of sage and cold dirt, but today, the beauty of the landscape felt like a mockery. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles were white, and the leather wrap felt slick against my palms. I had left Jenna at the cabin. She was still asleep, or pretending to be asleep, burrowed under my expensive down comforter like a tick that had found a warm vein. I had not told her I was leaving. I just needed to be in a room with adults who followed laws and understood the concept of consequences. Pine Hollow was a tourist town that had managed to retain a shred of its mining town grit, mostly because the winters were too harsh for the casual vacationer. The main street was lined with brick buildings from the 1890s, housing a mix of overpriced boutiques and hardware stores that sold bear spray. I drove past the bakery where I usually bought cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings and pulled into the lot of the Granite Ridge Credit Union. It was a small bank, the kind with wood paneling on the walls and a pot of stale coffee in the lobby. I had opened an account here when I bought the cabin, mostly for local utilities and emergency cash. I walked in, my boots clicking sharply on the tile floor. There was only one other customer, an old man in flannel depositing a stack of checks. I approached the teller window, the woman behind the glass, whose name tag read Brenda, smiled at me. I recognized her. She had notarized the deed transfer for the cabin 4 years ago. "Good morning, Ms. Foster," she said brightly. "We don't see you in here often. Enjoying the fall colors?" "I wish," I said. My voice sounded calm, which was a testament to a decade of boardroom training. "I need to check on some activity on my account. Brenda, I received a notification about a credit inquiry, and I want to make sure everything is in order." Brenda nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Of course. Let me pull you up. Do you have your ID? I slid my driver's license under the glass. She glanced at it, typed a few more things, and then her typing stopped. Her eyebrows pulled together. She squinted at the screen, then looked up at me, then back at the screen. The smile was gone. "Ms. Foster," she said, her voice lower now. Did you apply for the home equity line of credit online?" "No," I said instantly. "I did not." Brenda bit her lip. She turned the monitor slightly away. A protective gesture. "Okay, well, we have a new line of credit opened in your name. It was approved 2 weeks ago. The initial draw was transferred out on Monday." "Transferred where?" I asked. The blood was draining from my face. "To a checking account ending in 442, she said. That was my local checking account, the one attached to the debit card Jenna had used. "How much?" I asked. "The line is approved for $50,000, Brenda said softly. "The initial draw was $20,000. $20,000. I felt the room tilt. I placed my hands on the counter to steady myself. "Brenda, I did not authorize that. I need you to freeze it. Immediately." Brenda looked pained. She typed a quick command. "I have locked it for now. But Ms. Foster, the application came through our secure portal. It passed all the identity verifications, social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name. It even answered the secondary security questions correctly." "What were the questions?" I demanded. Brenda hesitated, then read from the screen. "Make of your first car, and the name of your childhood elementary school." I closed my eyes. Review. 1998. Honda Civic, Maplewood Elementary. These were not things a hacker in a basement in another country would know. These were not things you could find in a data breach. These were facts that lived in photo albums. These were facts that were discussed at Thanksgiving dinners. "It passed too cleanly," Brenda murmured, almost to herself. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional suspicion. Usually, with identity theft, they trip up on the address history or the phone number verification. This application used your current cell number for the two-factor authentication code. The code was sent and entered within 30 seconds. My phone. Jenna had access to my phone. I had left it on the kitchen counter a dozen times while I was in the shower or out on the deck. She knew my passcode. I had given it to her a year ago when she needed to call Mark, and her battery had died. I never changed it. Why would I change it? She was my sister. "I need to speak to a fraud officer," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. "Mr. Henderson is in his office," Brenda said. "I will get him." I spent an hour in a small, beige office with Mr. Henderson, a man who smelled of peppermint tea and bad news. He printed out the application log for me. I stared at the metadata. The application had been submitted at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The IP address traced back to the cabin's internet service. It was undeniable. It wasn't just that Jenna had stolen from me. It was the intimacy of the theft that made me feel sick. She hadn't just taken a credit card from a wallet. She had worn my skin. She had used the details of our shared history. The school we both walked to. The car she learned to drive on after I went to college. To unlock a vault of money that wasn't hers. I walked out of the bank with a thick envelope of printed statements and an affidavit of fraud tucked under my arm. The sun was high overhead now, harsh and bright. I got back into my car and drove up the mountain, driving fast. When I pulled into the driveway, the black SUV was still there. The contractor's truck was gone, likely because I had not picked up their calls all morning. I walked into the house. Jenna was in the living room, sitting on the floor amidst the chaos of the renovation, painting her toenails. She had music playing, some upbeat pop song that clashed violently with the atmosphere in the room. She looked up as I entered, the nail polish brush poised over her big toe. "Oh, hey," she said, casual as a cat. "You were gone a while. I was going to make coffee, but I couldn't find the filters in this mess." I didn't speak. I walked over to the coffee table, swept a stack of magazines onto the floor with a violent swipe of my arm, and slammed the bank envelope down on the wood. The sound was like a gunshot. Jenna jumped, smearing red polish on her skin. "Alice, what is your problem?" "The problem," I said, pointing a shaking finger at the envelope, "is that I just came from Granite Ridge. Do you want to tell me why I have a $50,000 line of credit attached to this house that I didn't open?" Jenna froze. She looked at the envelope, then at me. Her face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally, a sort of deflated resignation. "You went to the bank?" she asked, her voice small. "Yes, Jenna, I went to the bank, because usually, when people commit felonies in my name, I like to know about it." "It is not a felony," she cried, scrambling to her feet. She tried to wipe the polish off her toe with her thumb, smearing it further. "God, Alice, stop using words like that. It sounds so dramatic." "Identity theft is a felony," I said, stepping closer to her. "Wire fraud is a felony. You used my social security number. You answered my security questions. You logged into my account. I might have clicked something," she stammered, backing away until her legs hit the edge of the sofa. "I was just looking into options. Mark said we needed liquidity. I was just checking to see what the rates were. And it processed. It was an accident." "An accident?" I laughed. A harsh barking sound. "You accidentally entered my social security number? You accidentally waited for the text code on my phone and typed it in? You accidentally transferred $20,000 to your checking account?" Jenna's face crumpled. She dropped the facade of the accident. She sat down heavily on the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't have a choice," she sobbed. The sound was muffled by her palms. "Mark, the business, Bright Root Living. It is right on the edge. Alice, we are so close to the launch. We just needed a bridge. The investors are dragging their feet on the Series B round, and we have vendors to pay. If we miss the payments, the whole supply chain would collapse." "Bright Root Living," I repeated. "That is the wellness company? The one selling the essential oil diffusers?" "It is a lifestyle brand." Jenna looked up, her eyes red and fierce. "It is going to be huge. Mark has put everything into this. We mortgaged the house in Denver. We maxed out the cards. We are all in. But the cash flow, it is just tight right now. We just needed a few weeks. As soon as the product launches next month, the revenue will be insane. I was going to pay the line of credit back before you even noticed. I swear." I looked at her. I saw the desperation radiating off her like heat. I saw the fear, but I also saw the entitlement. She truly believed that her husband's failing business venture justified stripping the equity out of my home. "You stole from me," I said quietly. "You put my home at risk for Mark's pyramid scheme." "It is not a pyramid scheme," she screamed. "Why don't you support us? Why do you always have to be so cynical? You have so much. Alice, you have this house. You have your job. You have savings. We have nothing right now. We are drowning, and you are standing here worrying about paperwork." "I am worrying about theft," I said. "And I am done listening to this." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "I am calling Ridgeline Renovations right now, and you are going to sit there and listen." "Don't," Jenna pleaded, reaching out a hand. "Please, Alice, the deposit is non-refundable." I dialed the number on the estimate I had found in the trash. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Ridgeline, this is Mike." "Mike, this is Alice Foster," I said, "the owner of the cabin on Pine Creek Road." "Oh, hey Alice," Mike said, his tone shifting to a forced friendliness. "We got the materials ordered. I know you said you were in a rush, so we pulled some strings to get the cabinets here by Friday." "I said I was in a rush?" I asked, looking directly at Jenna. She flinched. "Yeah," Mike said. "When you called last week, you said you had family coming in for the holidays and needed it done ASAP. That is why we added the rush fee to the invoice. $500, remember?" "Right," I said. "And when I signed the contract, did I do that in person?" "Nah, you did the e-signature," Mike said. You told me you were too busy at the firm to meet up, so I emailed it over. We got it back an hour later. Look, is there a problem? Because once I cut the stone for the counters, that's it. There is a problem, Mike, I said. The problem is that I didn't sign that contract. My sister did. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Whoa, Mike said. Okay, lady. I don't want to get in the middle of a domestic dispute. I have a signed contract and a deposit check that cleared. As far as I am concerned, the job is live. Stop the work, I said firmly. Do not bring the cabinets on Friday. Do not cut the stone. I am disputing the charges. You can dispute whatever you want, Mike said, his voice hardening. But if you cancel now, you are eating the material's cost, and I am keeping the deposit. Read the fine print. He hung up. I lowered the phone. Jenna was watching me, her eyes wide. You canceled it? She whispered. Mark is going to kill me. He told the guys at the site that the renovation was proof of funds. He used the contract to show Caldwell that we had assets. Who is Caldwell? I asked. This was the second time I had heard the name. Jenna looked away. Just a lender, a private lender. A loan shark? No, he is a hard money lender. It is a legitimate business, but he is strict. He wants to see that we have collateral. But you don't have collateral, I said. I do. You used my cabin as collateral for a hard money loan? No. Jenna shook her head frantically. Not a lien, just optics. Mark told him we were doing a major renovation on our mountain property. It shows liquidity. It buys us time. Our mountain property, I said, tasting the bitterness of the words. I walked over to the kitchen island, or what was left of it, just a frame of 2x4s. I took a deep breath. I needed to de-escalate this before it exploded. I needed to get her out, but I also needed to make sure I wasn't left with a gutted house and a lawsuit. Here is what is going to happen, I said. My voice was steady, the voice I used when firing someone. We are going to stop everything. I will eat the deposit. I will deal with Mike. You are going to sign a document admitting that you opened the line of credit without my permission. We are going to set up a repayment plan. You will pay me back every cent of the $20,000, plus interest, and you are going to leave today. Jenna looked at me. She blinked. Then, abruptly, her shoulders slumped. Okay, she said softly. I paused. It was too easy. She didn't fight. She didn't argue about the family aspect. She just agreed. Okay? I asked. Yeah, you are right, she said. She stood up and smoothed down her t-shirt. I messed up. I panicked. Mark put so much pressure on me. I just broke. I will sign whatever you want. I will call Mark and tell him we have to find another way. She looked at me with those big, watery eyes. I am sorry, Allie, really. I just got in over my head. My gut twisted. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was just stupidity and desperation. But the speed of her capitulation made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It felt like the reaction of someone who needed to end the conversation because the alternative was worse. She was agreeing to my terms because she needed me to stop digging. Fine, I said. I will type it up. I spent the next 2 hours on my laptop, drafting a promissory note. It was not my area of law, but I knew enough to make it binding. Jenna stayed in the bedroom, packing. The house was quiet. Around 4 in the afternoon, I heard a vehicle crunching up the driveway. I looked out the window. It wasn't the contractor. It was a white pickup truck, not a work truck. There were no logos on the side, no ladder rack. It was a pristine, heavy-duty truck with tinted windows. A man got out. He was tall, wearing a clean Carhartt jacket and dark jeans. He didn't look like a laborer. He looked like he worked out in a gym, not on a job site. I opened the front door before he could knock. I stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man smiled. It was a practice smile, showing teeth, but no warmth. His eyes were scanning the interior of the cabin over my shoulder. Afternoon, he said. His voice was smooth, pleasant. I am looking for Jenna. He didn't say Jenna Foster, just Jenna. And he didn't ask if this was the Foster residence. He knew she was here. She is not available, I said. Who are you? I'm a materials rep, he said. Just needed to drop off some samples for the kitchen project. Mark said she would be here. I am the homeowner, I said. We are canceling the project. We don't need samples. The man's gaze snapped back to me. He looked me up and down, assessing me. He didn't look intimidated. He looked bored. Canceling? He asked. That is a shame. Mark seemed pretty excited about the upgrades. Who are you with? I asked. Ridgeline? I am independent, he said. He took a step closer to the stairs. He was invading my personal space now. Look, if Jenna is around, I would really like to say hi, just to clear up some details. She is sleeping, I lied. And you are trespassing. Please leave. The man held my gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he smiled again. All right, he said. You tell her Randy stopped by. Tell her, Mr. Caldwell is eager to see the finished product. He turned and walked back to his truck. He didn't rush. He moved with the casual arrogance of someone who knew exactly where the power lay. I watched him drive away. Caldwell. I shut the door and locked it. My heart was hammering. That was not a materials rep. That was a message. I turned around. Jenna was standing in the hallway. She was pale, her face stripped of color. She had heard everything. Who was that? She whispered. He said his name was Randy. I said, he works for Caldwell. Jenna flinched as if I had slapped her. She leaned against the wall, sliding down until she was crouching on the floor. Oh God, she breathed. Oh God. Jenna, I said, walking over to her. What have you done? Who are these people? I can't talk about it, she said, shaking her head. I just need to fix it. I need to fix the money. You are not fixing anything, I said. You are packing. You are leaving. I can't leave, she shrieked suddenly, looking up at me. If I leave, they will find me at the apartment. Mark is not there. He is in the city trying to raise funds. I am alone. You are staying here because you are hiding, I realized aloud. You didn't come here to renovate my kitchen. You came here because Caldwell doesn't know this address. Or he didn't. He doesn't know it, Jenna insisted. Mark just told him we had a place in the mountains. He doesn't have the address. Randy just drove up my driveway, I said. He has the address. Jenna. I needed to see outside. I needed to see if the truck was really gone. I pulled out my phone and tapped the icon for my security cameras. I had installed a ring of cameras around the property 2 years ago. One on the porch, one on the driveway, one on the back deck. The app opened, but instead of the live feed, I saw a login screen. Session expired. Please log in. I frowned. I typed in my password. Incorrect password. I typed it again, carefully. Incorrect password. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I hit the forgot password link. Password reset email sent to j@gmail.com. My breath hitched. That wasn't my email. That was Jenna's email. Jenna, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Did you change the password to the security cameras? She looked up from the floor. She looked guilty, but also defiant. I had to, she said. I needed to make sure no one was coming. I set up alerts to my phone. I didn't want you getting notifications every time Mark or I went in or out. I didn't want you asking questions before the reveal. You locked me out of my own security system? I just changed the admin email. It is not a big deal. I can change it back. It is a big deal, I yelled. Someone is managing access to my house, and it isn't me. You disabled my eyes. Jenna, you blinded me. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a kitchen. It was an occupation. She had systematically dismantled my control over my own life. She had taken my credit, my signature, my keys. And now my sight. I stared at her, and for the first time in my life, I was actually afraid of my sister. Not physically afraid. I could take her in a fight. But afraid of the chaos she carried with her. She was a black hole, and she was pulling my entire life into her event horizon. Jenna stood up. The fear on her face vanished, replaced by a sudden, jarring brightness. It was like a switch had been flipped. Okay, she said, waving her hands as if shooing away a fly. Calm down. You are so intense, Alice. Look, I will reset the password for you later. I am going to make some coffee. Do you want some? I bought those beans you like, the Ethiopian ones. She turned and walked into the kitchen. Stepping over a pile of drywall debris, she started rummaging for the coffee grinder. How can you talk about coffee? I asked, stunned. A man just threatened us. You committed fraud. I am shaking. Jenna. You are cold, she said over her shoulder. Her voice was sing-song, light. You have always been cold. You just need to warm up. Coffee will help, and then we can talk about Mark's contract. He has a plan. Alice, a really good plan. I watched her back. I recognized this. When we were kids, after she would break one of my toys or steal my allowance, she would do this. She would pivot. She would become the caretaker. She would make me tea, or braid my hair, and act like the bad thing had never happened. And if I stayed angry, I was the one ruining the moment. I was the one being difficult. She was controlling the emotional temperature. She was deciding that the crisis was over. And if I continued to panic, I was the unstable one. I don't want coffee, I said. Don't be like that, she said, the grinder whirring to life, drowning out my voice. We are family. We figure it out. I stood in the living room, listening to the grinder scream, and I realized that I was trapped. I couldn't physically throw her out, not with that man Randy lurking somewhere on the mountain. I couldn't call the police without arresting my sister, and I couldn't leave my house unprotected. I was a hostage in my own home, and my captor was currently making me a pour-over. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the gravel. The woods, which had always felt like a shield, now felt like a cage. I needed help. I couldn't handle this with spreadsheets and logic. I needed someone who understood how to fight dirty. I thought of Maren Klein. I had gone to law school with her briefly before I switched to finance. She had barely passed the bar, but she was tenacious. She had opened a practice in Alder Creek, the next town over. She handled divorces, DUIs, and consumer disputes. She wasn't a corporate shark like the lawyers at my firm. She was a street fighter. I waited until Jenna was pouring the water over the grounds, humming to herself. Then I slipped into the bathroom, turned on the faucet to mask the sound, and pulled out my phone. I searched for Klein Sato Legal Group. I hit call. It was time to stop being a sister. It was time to start being a plaintiff. I sat in the driver's seat of my Subaru, parked a quarter-mile down the road from my own driveway, with the heat blasting against my frozen fingers. The reception up here was spotty, a single bar of LTE that flickered in and out like a dying candle. But it was enough. I had told Jenna I was going for a hike to clear my head. In reality, I was seeking the only thing that had ever made sense to me: legal counsel. Maren Klein picked up on the second ring. Her voice was sharp, clear, and devoid of the emotional static that was currently drowning my life. Klein and Sato, she said. Maren, it is Alice Foster, I said, leaning my forehead against the steering wheel. I need help. I had known Maren since our first year of law school, before I realized I preferred the clean logic of numbers to the messy theater of courtrooms. Maren had stayed the course. She operated out of a converted Victorian house in Alder Creek, handling everything from property disputes to divorces. She was cynical, brilliant, and possessed a moral compass that pointed true north, even if she had to break a few fingers to get there. I spilled everything. I told her about the kitchen, the farmhouse sink, the credit line, the forged signature, and the man named Randy who had smiled at me like a wolf looking at a lamb chop. I spoke for 10 minutes without breathing, the words tumbling out in a frantic heap. When I finished, There was a long silence on the other end. "Alice," Marin said finally. Her tone had shifted from professional to something harder. "You know what this is, right?" "It is a family mess," I said weakly. "No," Marin corrected me. "It is felony identity fraud. It is forgery. It is grand larceny. And if that man Randy is who I think he is, a collector for a hard money lender, then it is also dangerous. She is my sister. Marin." "That is exactly why she was able to do it," Marin said. "Strangers don't know your mother's maiden name. Strangers don't know where you keep your deed. Listen to me closely. You are looking at this through the lens of a relationship. You need to look at it through the lens of a crime scene, because that is what your cabin is right now. It is not a home. It is an active crime scene." "I don't want to arrest her," I said, the guilt already pooling in my stomach. "I just want her to stop. I want my money back. I want Mark to fix this." "Mark isn't going to fix this," Marin said. "If they went to a lender like Caldwell, they are already past the point of fixing things legally. Caldwell Capital Solutions is known in the county. They target distressed assets. They lend money to people who can't get it from a bank because the interest rates are extortionate and the collateral terms are aggressive. Jenna didn't just borrow money. Alice, she put a target on your back." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What do I do?" I asked. "Document everything," Marin advised. "Do not confront her again without evidence in your hand, if you confront her with emotion. She will gaslight you. You know she will. She will make you feel like the bad guy for caring about money. So you need to be cold. You need screenshots, invoices, call logs, metadata. I need you to build a file that is so thick that if we have to go to the police, there is no, he said, she said, it will be, she did, and here's the proof. And then we file a police report," Marin said, "not to put her in jail, necessarily, but to create a paper trail. If Caldwell comes for your house, you need an official police record stating that the debt was incurred fraudulently. Without that, the law assumes you authorized it. If you don't report her, you are adopting her debt." I hung up the phone feeling heavier than before. Adopting the debt. It was such a sterile phrase for losing my future to pay for my sister's mistakes. I drove back to the cabin. The sun was dipping below the ridge, casting long, bruised shadows across the snow-dusted ground. Jenna was in the living room when I entered, curled up on the sofa with a mug of tea, watching a reality show on her iPad. She looked so small, so harmless. It was hard to reconcile this woman in fluffy socks with the person who had impersonated me to a bank. I walked past her without a word, went into the guest room, and locked the door. That night, while Jenna slept, or pretended to sleep, I began to work. I sat on the floor of the guest room with my laptop. The screen brightness turned down to the lowest setting. I logged into everything. First, the credit union portal. I downloaded the application PDF. I took screenshots of the login history. I found the IP address logs. Marin was right. The act of organizing was soothing. It turned the betrayal into data points. Data points didn't hurt. They just existed. I went through my email trash folder. I found the confirmation emails from Ridgeline Renovations that Jenna had deleted. I found a notification from my cell provider about a SIM card inquiry that I had missed 2 weeks ago. She had tried to clone my phone. She had failed. But she had tried. Then I went to the security camera account. I hit the reset password link again. And this time, since I had my phone in my hand, I intercepted the code before Jenna could see it on hers. If she was even awake, I regained access. I scrolled back through the footage history. 2 weeks ago. A white truck pulling up, Mark getting out. He was pacing the driveway, talking on his phone, gesturing wildly at the house. I turned the volume up, holding the phone to my ear. "It is perfect," Mark's tiny, tinny voice said. "The appraisal will come in high. We can pull at least $60,000 out of the remodel. Yeah, she is absentee. She never comes up here before November. We have a month. Easy." I rewound it. "She is absentee. He wasn't talking about a sister. He was talking about a landlord. He was talking about an exploitable resource. I watched another clip. Jenna standing on the porch, talking to the man named Randy. This was 3 days ago. Randy was leaning against the railing, invading her space. Jenna was hugging herself, looking terrified. Mr. Caldwell likes clarity. Jenna, Randy was saying. His voice was smooth, low. He doesn't like surprises. You said the owner was on board. You said the funds were secured. She is! Jenna's voice was high, desperate. My sister is totally on board. She travels a lot. I am handling the paperwork. Good, Randy said, because the interest payment on the bridge loan is due on the 1st, and we would hate to have to file a lien on a property with such nice views. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking so hard the image on the screen blurred. Bridge loan. The next morning, the air in the cabin was thick with unsaid things. Jenna was making oatmeal, humming a tune that was slightly off-key. She was trying to normalize the atmosphere, trying to pull me back into the rhythm of our shared childhood where breakfast fixed everything. I placed my laptop on the counter, right next to the stove. I know about Caldwell, I said. Jenna froze. The spoon in her hand clattered against the pot. She didn't turn around. Her shoulders rose, tensing up toward her ears. I don't know what you mean, she said. I recovered the security footage. Jenna, I said. I saw Randy. I heard Mark. I know you took a bridge loan, and I know you lied to them and said I was a co-borrower. Jenna turned around slowly. Her face was pale, stripped of the false cheer she'd been wearing like armor. It was supposed to be short-term, she whispered. Just a bridge. Mark has a brand partnership coming through. A huge one. With a hotel chain. They are going to put bright root diffusers in every suite. The contract is worth 6 figures. Alice, once that check clears, we pay Caldwell back. We pay the credit line off, and you get a free kitchen. Everyone wins. Everyone wins? I repeated, incredulous. You forged my signature. You stole my identity. That is not winning. That is a crime. It was strategy, Jenna insisted, her voice gaining strength. Business is messy. Alice, you know that. You work in finance. Sometimes you have to leverage assets to get to the next level. Mark is a visionary. He just needs capital to execute. Mark is a liar, I said, and I want to talk to him. Now. Jenna hesitated, then pulled her phone out of her pocket. She dialed, put it on speaker, and set it on the counter between us. It rang 4 times. Hey, babe. Mark's voice filled the kitchen. He sounded breathless, like he was walking fast. Everything good? Did the tile guy show up? Mark, Alice is here, Jenna said. She knows. There was a pause, a silence that stretched for 5 seconds. Alice, Mark said, his voice pivoting instantly to a warm, jovial tone. Hi. Listen, I am so glad you are there. Jenna told me you were surprised. I know. We should have looped you in earlier, but we wanted it to be a big reveal. The kitchen is going to be incredible, right? That sink is a game changer. Cut the crap, Mark, I said. I know about the credit line. I know about Caldwell. I know you are using my house to secure a loan I didn't agree to. Whoa, Mark said, chuckling nervously. Let's not use words like using. We are optimizing. Look, Alice, you have this asset sitting there, doing nothing. It is dead equity. We are just unlocking it. Brightroot is about to explode. We are in the final stages of a partnership that is going to put us on the map. This renovation? It is an investment. We are increasing the value of your property while simultaneously creating a liquidity event for the business. It is synergy. I felt a vein throb in my temple. Synergy? You committed fraud. Mark, you are misinterpreting family help, Mark said, his voice turning slightly condescending. We are doing this for us, for the family legacy. Jenna and I are working our tails off here. We are trying to build something, and honestly, Alice, a little gratitude wouldn't be misplaced. We are managing the contractors. We are dealing with the headache. You just have to sign a few papers, and you walk away with a $50,000 upgrade. I am not signing anything, I said. And if you don't pay back that $20,000 by Friday, I am going to the police. Mark laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. Don't be dramatic, Alice. You are not going to the police. Think about what that would do to Jenna. Think about the stress. She is your sister. You are not going to send your sister to jail over a misunderstanding about countertops. It is not about countertops, I said. It is about the man named Randy who came to my door yesterday. The line went dead silent. Randy came by? Mark asked, his voice suddenly stripped of all the sales charm. Yes, and he thinks I am a co-borrower. Okay, Mark said. Okay, listen to me. Don't talk to Randy. If he comes back, you don't answer the door. I will handle Caldwell. Just stay in the house. Keep the blinds down. I will fix this. You are not fixing anything, I said. I am canceling the renovation. I am freezing the accounts. Do not cancel the renovation, Mark shouted. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice. If you stop the work, Caldwell will know the asset isn't being improved. He will call the loan. Alice, if he calls the loan today, we don't have the cash. We need 2 more weeks. That is not my problem, I said. It is your problem, Mark snapped. Because his name is on your title now. I stared at the phone. What? Jenna, Mark said. Tell her? I looked at my sister. She was staring at her oatmeal, tears sliding down her nose. Jenna? I asked. I forged a quitclaim deed, she whispered. Just to show Caldwell. I didn't file it. I swear I didn't file it with the county. I just showed it to him so he would think I had partial ownership, so he would approve the loan. The room spun. She had forged a deed. She had legally, or visibly, claimed half my house to a loan shark. I reached out and ended the call. Mark was still shouting something about leverage when the silence cut him off. I needed to get out of the house. I couldn't breathe the same air as her. I am going to town, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Do not speak to me when I get back. I grabbed my keys and fled. I drove into Pine Hollow again, but not to the bank. I needed to know the truth about Bright Root Living. Mark had talked about partnerships and synergy. I needed to see if the business even existed outside of his delusions. I went to the Pine Hollow Community Board, a cork board protected by plexiglass outside the post office where locals pinned up notices. I scanned the flyers for yoga classes and firewood sales, and then I saw it. It was a small, printed notice, pinned aggressively in the corner with 4 red thumbtacks. Notice to vendors. Do not accept checks from Bright Root Living or Mark Foster. Accounts closed /NSF. Contact Sheriff's Civil Division regarding outstanding judgments. It wasn't just a bad quarter. It wasn't a cash flow issue. They were bouncing checks all over town. I walked over to the local coffee shop. The Grind. The girl behind the counter, a teenager with purple hair, saw me staring at the community board. You looking for the firewood guy? She asked. No, I said. I saw the notice about Bright Root. Oh, them, she scoffed. Yeah, they rented the community center for a launch party 2 months ago. Big catered thing. They didn't pay the caterer. My mom runs the catering company. He stiffed her $3,000. Said his investors were transferring the funds. We are still waiting. I bought a black coffee, my hands trembling as I handed over the cash. Mark wasn't waiting on a partnership. He was drowning. The business was dead, and he was using my cabin not as an investment, but as a lifeboat. He was stripping parts off my ship to keep his afloat for just a few more days. I drove back up the mountain with a cold clarity settling in my chest. The anger was gone, replaced by a survival instinct. When I walked back into the cabin, Jenna was packing. She had a suitcase open on the floor of the living room, but she wasn't packing to leave. She was reorganizing. She was moving her clothes from the guest room into the master loft, my room. What are you doing? I asked. Jenna looked up. She looked exhausted, her face blotchy. I can't sleep in the guest room, she said. The window faces the driveway. I need to be upstairs. It feels safer. You are not sleeping upstairs, I said. You are not sleeping here at all. You are leaving. By Friday. I can't leave, Jenna cried, dropping a stack of sweaters. Alice, you don't understand. Caldwell's people. They know where we live in Denver. They have been driving by the house. That is why I came here. They don't have the address for the cabin, or they didn't, until Mark opened his big mouth. So you brought them here, I said. You led the wolves to my door because you didn't want them at yours. I needed a safe place. This isn't a safe place anymore, I shouted. It is a trap, and you put me inside it with you. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter what you meant, I said. It matters what you did. You forged a deed. Jenna, Marin says that is fraud. Real, prison time fraud. Jenna flinched. You told Marin? Yes, and she told me to get you out. I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. Friday at noon, that is the deadline. You pack your car, and you go. I don't care where. Go to a hotel. Go to Mom's. But you cannot stay here. Jenna stared at me. Her expression shifted. The desperation hardened into something icy and unfamiliar. You can't kick me out, she said quietly. It is my house. It is our family's safety, she said. If I leave, and Caldwell finds me, whatever happens is on you. If I get hurt, Alice, it is on you. You really want that on your conscience? You are going to choose your precious hardwood floors over your sister's safety? I am choosing not to be an accomplice, I said. You don't understand what they do when you don't cooperate, she said. Her voice was flat, dead. They don't just sue you, they break things. Mark told me stories. If we don't pay the bridge loan by the 1st, they are going to come for the collateral, and since you canceled the renovation, the value hasn't gone up. They are going to be angry. Get out, I said. No, she said, and she turned her back on me and walked up the stairs to my loft. I stood there, impotent. I couldn't physically drag her out. I weighed 120 pounds. She was bigger than me, and fueled by a terrified adrenaline I couldn't match. A horn honked outside. I looked out the window. A Ridgeline Renovations truck had pulled up. I threw the door open and marched out onto the porch. I canceled this, I yelled at the driver. I called Mike yesterday and canceled the order. The driver, a young guy in a baseball cap, looked down at a clipboard. I got a call this morning reconfirming, he said. From Alice Foster, said to bring the lumber for the framing, said it was urgent. I felt the blood drain from my face. I am Alice Foster, I said. And I did not call you. The driver shrugged. Look, lady, I don't know what to tell you. The boss said bring the wood. It is already paid for. He signaled to his partner, and they started unloading 2x4s, stacking them on my driveway. I turned back to the house. Jenna was watching from the loft window. She had called them. After I told her to stop, after I caught her, she had waited until I went to town, picked up the phone, and pretended to be me again. She wasn't stopping. She wasn't sorry. She was doubling down. I didn't go back inside. I couldn't look at her. I sat on the porch steps, watching the men stack the wood that I would have to pay someone to haul away later. The sun went down, and the temperature dropped, but I stayed outside until my teeth chattered. When I finally went in, the cabin was dark. Jenna was asleep in my bed upstairs. I saw her purse sitting on the kitchen counter, the same bag she had guarded so jealously since I arrived. I shouldn't have done it. It was an invasion of privacy, but the concept of privacy had been detonated days ago. I opened the bag. Inside, buried under lipstick tubes and old receipts, was a small, spiral-bound notebook. I opened it. It was a ledger, handwriting that I recognized as Mark's, with notes in Jenna's looping script in the margins. It was a timeline of my life, weaponized. September 15th. Alice gets bonus. Estimate, $15,000. Status, confirmed. September 20th. Alice goes to conference. House empty. Action. Move in. September 22nd. Apply for HELOC. Use old email for verification. October 1st. Renovation starts. Send photos to Caldwell. And then, a column on the right side labeled pressure points. If she pushes back, guilt trip, mom's death. Family helps family. Threaten Mark's safety. She has a savior complex. Remind her cabin has value only because we maintain it. My finger traced the words. Savior complex. They had scripted our arguments. They had planned my reactions. Every tear Jenna cried. Every plea for family was a calculated move on a chessboard. They had profiled me. They knew I would try to save them. They were banking on it. I turned the page. Goal. Secure $50,000 from HELOC. Use $10,000 for renovation to show progress. Siphon $40,000 to Brightroot operating account. They weren't just renovating the kitchen, they were laundering the money. The renovation was a front to explain the withdrawal of funds to the bank, while they funneled the bulk of it into their dying business. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the counter. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't even a victim. I was a resource. I was a vein of ore they had discovered and decided to mine until I was empty. I closed the notebook and put it back in the bag. I walked down the hall to the guest room, stepped over a roll of insulation, and sat on the bed. I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the contact for the sheriff's department. Marin had said to document over confrontation. I had the documentation, I had the ledger, but I also had the realization that the people upstairs weren't my family anymore. They were parasites, and you don't negotiate with parasites. You exterminate them. I didn't call the police, not yet. I sent a text to Marin. I have the proof. They planned it. What is the fastest way to evict someone who claims they own the house? I lay down in the dark, listening to the wind chimes clanging outside, the wind chimes I hadn't bought. Ringing in a wind I could no longer feel. I was done being warm. It was time to be as cold as the mountain. The laptop screen glowed with a cold blue light, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air of the guest room. My finger hovered over the trackpad. It was a small movement, a fraction of an inch, but it felt like pulling the trigger on a weapon I did not know how to aim. Freeze my credit file. Marin Klein had been clear. The only way to stop the bleeding was to apply a tourniquet, and in the modern world, that meant locking down the 3 major credit bureaus. It meant that no one, not me, not Mark, not Jenna, could open a new account, take out a loan, or even get a store credit card in my name. I clicked, Experian, frozen, TransUnion, frozen, Equifax, frozen. The confirmation screens popped up one by one. Sterile and green, it was done. I sat back against the headboard, waiting for a sense of relief. It didn't come. Instead, a heavy, suffocating guilt settled in my stomach. I had just severed my sister's lifeline. I knew, logically, that the lifeline was actually a noose around my neck. But the biology of family is not logical. It screamed at me that I was the aggressor. I was the one cutting ties. I was the one making things difficult. I closed the laptop and rubbed my temples. I could hear Jenna downstairs. She was pacing. The floorboards in the cabin were old heart pine. They transmitted every restless movement. 10 minutes later, the screaming started. Alice! It wasn't a call. It was a shriek. I unlocked the guest room door and walked out to the landing. Jenna was standing at the bottom of the stairs. Her phone clutched in her hand like a stone she wanted to throw. Her face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated panic. "What did you do?" she yelled, looking up at me. "I am trying to order the backsplash tile. The transaction was declined. It says there is a security freeze." I froze my credit. "Jenna," I said, descending the stairs slowly. I held onto the railing. My legs felt weak. "I told you I was going to stop this. You froze it?" She gaped at me, her eyes wide and terrified. "You can't just freeze it. The line of credit is already open. We need to draw on it to pay the deposit for the appliances." There are no appliances, I said. There is no renovation. I am shutting it down. You are ruining everything, she screamed. She threw her hands up, pacing a tight circle in the living room. You don't understand. If the money stops moving, they will know. Mark said we have to keep the accounts active. We have to show cash flow. Who is they, Jenna? I asked, reaching the bottom of the stairs. Caldwell? She stopped pacing. The color drained from her face at the mention of the name. She looked at the front door, then back at me, her voice dropping to a trembling whisper. If the payments stop, if the credit dries up, Mark says Caldwell will get angry. You do not want to see him angry. Alice, he is not like the bank. He doesn't send letters. He sends people. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear vibrating in her frame, but what turned my blood to ice was the realization of what that fear meant. She wasn't afraid of the police. She wasn't ashamed of stealing $20,000 from her little sister. She wasn't worried about my credit score or my home. She was terrified of a loan shark. She was more afraid of Caldwell than she was of hurting me. I was the acceptable casualty. I was the buffer she was willing to burn to keep the predator at bay. I am not afraid of Caldwell, I lied. I am afraid of losing my house to a fraud I didn't commit. It is not fraud, she insisted. Tears springing to her eyes again. That reflexive defense mechanism. It is a strategy. Why won't you just let us execute the plan? We were going to pay you back in 2 months. You are blowing this up for no reason. I am going to town, I said. I couldn't listen to the twisted logic anymore. Do not order anything else. If you try to use my card again, I will have you arrested. That is not a threat. Jenna, that is a promise. I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving her sobbing in the middle of the debris she had created. The mail truck was idling by my mailbox at the end of the long gravel drive. The carrier, a woman named Sarah, who had delivered my mail for years, waved a thick envelope at me as I pulled up. Certified for you, Ms. Foster, she said through her window. Need a signature. I signed the electronic pad, my hand shaking slightly. The envelope was from Granite Ridge Credit Union. I tore it open, sitting in the driver's seat of my Subaru. Notice of default and acceleration. The words were printed in bold, black capital letters. I scanned the document. It wasn't about the freezing of the credit. It was about the initial terms. Regarding loan number 8842-B, security instrument, 124 Pine Creek Road. We have received notice of suspicious activity and potential breach of contract regarding the occupancy status and intended use of funds stated in the application. Pursuant to Clause 4, Section B of your loan agreement, the lender demands immediate repayment of the outstanding principal balance of $20,000.00, plus accrued interest. Failure to remit full payment within 10 days will result in legal proceedings to foreclose on the collateral property. I lowered the paper. The air in the car felt suddenly thin. They weren't just investigating, they were calling the loan. Mark or Jenna must have triggered something. Maybe the frantic transfer of funds to a business account. Or maybe the bank's fraud algorithm had flagged the discrepancies before I even filed my report. Foreclose on the collateral property, my cabin, my sanctuary, the only thing I owned that felt truly mine. I put the car in gear and drove straight to Maren Klein's office in Alder Creek. Maren read the letter while I paced her small, book-lined office. She looked calm, which was the only thing keeping me from hyperventilating. This is standard aggression, Maren said, tossing the letter onto her desk. They are scared. They realize they issued a loan on a fraudulent application, and now they are trying to recover the cash before the liability hits their books. They are bullying you. Can they take the house? I asked. Not in 10 days, Maren said, but they can start the process, and once a lis pendens is filed against the title, your credit is nuclear winter. We need to get ahead of this. I froze the credit, I said. I did what you said. Good, Maren said. Now we do the hard part. We have to go to the bank and formally dispute the debt. And Alice? This is where it gets ugly. You have to tell them, on the record, that your sister stole your identity. You can't be vague. You can't say it was a misunderstanding. You have to say, Jenna Foster committed a felony. I stared at the spines of the law books on her shelf. If I do that, will they arrest her? Eventually. The district attorney might pick it up, Marin said. But right now, the bank just wants their money. If you prove you didn't authorize it, the liability shifts back to the bank for negligence. They will go after Jenna to recoup their loss. But if you don't pin it on her, the bank comes after you. Those are the two options. There is no third door where everyone holds hands and sings. We called the bank together. I sat on Marin's leather sofa, listening to the hold music, feeling like a child in the principal's office. When the fraud investigator finally came on the line, I followed Marin's script. My name is Alice Foster. I am reporting that the home equity line of credit ending in 42 was opened fraudulently by a third party without my consent. I did not sign the application. I did not receive the funds. Do you know the identity of the perpetrator? The investigator asked. His voice was bored, bureaucratic. I paused. I looked at Marin. She nodded firmly. Yes, I whispered. Then, louder. Yes, it was my sister, Jenna Foster. Understood, the man said. We will open a case. We will need a police report number to proceed with the liability waiver. The investigation typically takes 45 to 90 days. 90 days? I exclaimed. I have a default notice that says 10 days. The collections department is separate from fraud, the man said. You will need to send them a copy of the police report to pause collection activity. Until then, the automated system will continue. We hung up. I felt dirty. I felt exhausted. 90 days, I murmured. Jenna is still in my house. Mark is still out there. And I have 90 days of red tape. Time is the enemy, Marin agreed. Every day she stays in that cabin, she creates more liability. She could order more materials. She could let more contractors in. You need to get her out. I drove back up the mountain as the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple, beautiful and indifferent. When I opened the front door, the smell hit me. It wasn't paint or dust. It was cheese, sharp cheddar, butter, and toasted breadcrumbs. Jenna was in the kitchen, or the shell of the kitchen. She had set up a hot plate on a sawhorse. She was stirring a pot. She turned when I walked in. She had showered. She was wearing clean clothes, a soft gray sweater. Her hair was brushed. She looked like the sister I had known 5 years ago, before Mark, before the business schemes. I made mac and cheese, she said softly. The real kind, with the Gruyere and the nutmeg, just like Mom used to make. I stood in the entryway, my keys heavy in my hand. It was my favorite meal. It was the meal she used to make me when I came home crying from middle school because of bullies. It was the meal she made me the night our father walked out and never came back. I am not hungry, I said, though my stomach betrayed me with a quiet growl. Come on, Allie, she said, spooning a heap into a bowl. You have to eat. Look, I am sorry I yelled earlier. I am just under so much pressure. Mark is terrified, and I am terrified, and I just took it out on you. She walked over and held the bowl out to me. Her eyes were big and wet. Remember when we were kids? She asked, her voice trembling. Remember when Mom would work those double shifts, and I would lock all the doors and we would build a fort in the living room? I always protected you, Alice. I always made sure you were safe. When the thunder scared you, who crawled into your bed? Me. I looked at the bowl. I looked at her face. For a second, the anger wavered. I felt that old familiar pull, the gravity of shared trauma. We were the Foster girls. It was us against the world. She had protected me. She had been my shield when our mother was too exhausted to parent. I know you did, I said softly. I am still that person, Jenna said. Taking a step closer, I am still your big sister. I would never hurt you on purpose. This financial stuff, it got away from me. But we can fix it. If you just unfreeze the credit for a week, just 1 week, we can pay off the urgent vendors, and then Mark will get the partnership money. And we will pay everything back. I promise. Please, Allie, do it for me. Do it for the girl who built you the forts." I almost said yes. I almost took the bowl. But then my mind flashed to the ledger in her bag. Pressure point. Guilt trip. Mom. Family helps family. She wasn't reminiscing. She was reading from a script. She was using our mother's memory as a crowbar to pry open my wallet. The warmth in my chest curdled into bile. "The credit application," I said, my voice shaking, not with sadness, but with rage. "You answered the security questions." Jenna blinked. "What?" "To open the account, you had to answer security questions. One of them was the make of my first car. The other was my elementary school." "I guessed," she stammered. "I know those things." "And the verification email," I said. A new thought struck me. I hadn't checked that detail yet, but suddenly, I knew. Brenda at the bank said the verification code went to a secondary email on file. I don't have a secondary email on my main profile. I pulled out my phone. I logged into my banking app, my fingers flying. I went to the profile settings. There it was. Under recovery email, sk8er_girl_92@yahoo.com. I stared at the screen. The breath left my lungs. "Skater Girl 92, I read aloud. Jenna flinched. She took a step back, the bowl of mac and cheese tilting dangerously. "That was my email," I whispered. "From high school. I haven't used that account in 15 years. I don't even know the password." I looked up at her. "But you do. You helped me set it up. You knew the password was Leonardo because I had a crush on DiCaprio. You accessed an account that has been dead for a decade to bypass my security alerts." "I just remembered it," she said weakly. "You planned this," I said. "You didn't just click something impulsively. You sat down and resurrected my teenage identity to steal from me. That email? That was private. That was where I wrote to my friends about boys. That was mine. And you used it like a key." The intimacy of the violation hit me harder than the $20,000. She had mined our childhood for data. She had weaponized the fact that she knew my secrets. I slapped the bowl out of her hand. It wasn't a conscious decision. My hand just moved. The bowl flew across the room and shattered against the stone fireplace. Macaroni and cheese splattered onto the hearth, steaming and pathetic. "Clean it up," I said, "and then get out of my sight." I turned and walked out the front door into the freezing night. The Pine Hollow Sheriff's Office was a small brick building next to the fire station. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I stood at the front desk. A deputy with a kind, tired face looked up at me. His name tag read, "Deputy Miller." "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I need to file a report," I said. My voice was steady now, cold. "Identity theft, fraud, forgery." Deputy Miller pulled a form from a tray. "All right. Who is the suspect?" "My sister," I said. "Jenna Foster." He paused. He looked at me with that familiar look. The, "Are you sure you want to do this" look. "Family matters can get complicated," he said gently. "Once you file this, it goes into the system. If there is evidence, we have to investigate. We might have to issue a warrant." "I understand," I said. "Do you want us to go pick her up tonight?" he asked. "Is she dangerous?" I thought about Jenna in the kitchen, offering me pasta with trembling hands. I thought about the fear in her eyes when she talked about Caldwell. "No," I said. "I don't want you to arrest her tonight. She is squatting in my house, but I'm handling the eviction separately. I just need the report filed. I need the case number for the bank. I need a paper trail that proves I did not authorize the debt." "Documentation only," Deputy Miller nodded. "Smart? Keeps you in the clear?" I spent an hour filling out the forms. I attached copies of the bank statements, the forged Ridgeline estimate, and the text messages where she admitted to handling it. When I walked out, I held a small pink slip of carbon paper in my hand. Case number 24-0991. It was a shield. It was the first thing I had that Mark couldn't talk his way out of. I returned to the cabin an hour later. The mac and cheese had been cleaned up. The house was silent. But there was a new vehicle in the driveway. It was a Range Rover, silver, older model, but kept immaculate. Mark's truck was in the shop. Jenna had said, "This must be the loaner, or maybe another rental he couldn't afford." I walked into the house. Mark was sitting in my favorite armchair. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He looked handsome, successful, and completely at ease. He held a tumbler of my whiskey in his hand. Jenna was sitting on the ottoman at his feet. Her knees pulled up to her chest. She had been crying again. "Alice," Mark said, standing up and flashing a bright white smile. "Welcome home. Long day?" I stood by the door. I didn't take off my coat. "Get out of my chair, Mark." Mark laughed. A rich baritone sound. "Straight to business. I respect that. Look, Jenna told me you guys had a little friction today. The credit freeze? A bit extreme. Ally, but I get it. You are risk-averse. That is why you are good at your job." "I filed a police report," I said. The smile didn't drop, but it froze. His eyes, which were usually warm crinkles of charm, went flat. "You did what?" "I just came from the sheriff's office," I said. "Case number 240991, identity theft, naming Jenna Foster as the primary suspect." Jenna let out a small whimper. Mark looked down at her, then back at me. He took a sip of whiskey. "Okay," he said slowly. "Okay, you are playing hardball. I can see that. But you haven't pressed charges yet, have you? You just filed a report." "It is in the system," I said. "The bank has it." "Well, that is a problem," Mark said, setting the glass down on the side table. "But it is a fixable problem." He reached into a leather satchel by his feet and pulled out a document. It was bound in a blue legal cover. "I brought a solution," he said. "I call it the Family Investment Agreement." He held it out to me. I didn't move. "What is it?" "It is a retroactive contract," Mark explained, his voice taking on that smooth, pitching cadence. "It states that you appointed Jenna as your property manager with full power of attorney to secure financing for improvements. It validates the HELOC. It validates the signatures. It makes everything legal." "Why would I sign that?" I asked. "Because," Mark said, flipping to the back page, "it also includes a repayment schedule, guaranteed by Brightroot Living's future receivables. We pay you 5% interest on the $20,000. Everyone walks away clean. You withdraw the police report. The bank calls off the dogs. And Jenna doesn't go to jail." He uncapped a pen and held it out. "Just sign right there. I already notarized my signature. We just need yours." I looked at the pen. I looked at the contract. It was a trap. If I signed it, I was admitting that I had authorized the debt. I would be liable for every penny. And when Brightroot inevitably failed, I would be left holding the bag, and I would have no legal recourse because I had signed away my right to claim fraud. "No," I said. Mark blinked. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. "I am not signing your fake contract. I am not validating your fraud. The police report stays. The credit freeze stays. And you are leaving." Mark's face changed. It was a subtle shift, like a shadow passing over a landscape. The charm evaporated, the jaw set, the muscles in his neck tightened. "Alice," he said. His voice was deeper now, harder. "You need to think very carefully about this. You are making it worse." "I am not the one who forged a deed," I said. "You don't know what we are dealing with." Mark snapped. He took a step toward me. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall. "Caldwell isn't a bank. If that loan goes into default because you froze the accounts, he is going to liquidate the collateral. Do you understand? He will take this house. He will strip it to the studs." "Let him try," I said. "I have a lawyer." "Lawyers don't stop bullet points," Mark shouted. Jenna flinched violently at the volume. "Mark," she whispered. "Mark, stop." "Shut up, Jenna." Mark hissed, not looking at her. He was staring at me, his eyes cold and predatory. Your sister is trying to sink us. She is trying to destroy the family because she is jealous. Jealous? I asked, incredulous. You have always been jealous, Mark sneered. Sitting up here in your paid-off cabin with your perfect credit, judging us. You want us to fail. You want to see Jenna crawl. I want my kitchen back, I yelled. I want my life back. You sign this paper, Mark said, pointing the pen at my chest. Or I promise you, Alice, the debt will be the least of your problems. I will sue you for breach of verbal contract. I will tie this property up in litigation for 10 years. You will never sell it. You will never enjoy it. I looked at him. I saw the desperation behind the threat. He was cornered. He had promised Caldwell money he didn't have, based on a house he didn't own, and now the walls were closing in. Get out, I said. Both of you. We are not leaving, Mark said. He sat back down in my chair. He crossed his legs. This is Jenna's residence. She has established tenancy. You have to evict us, and that takes 30 days. He smiled. It was a terrifying smile. I guess we are roommates. Alice? I looked at Jenna. She was trembling, staring at the floor. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Mark, waiting for instructions. I realized then that Mark wasn't just a dreamer with bad luck. He was the architect. He had groomed her. He had steered her. And now, he was steering my life into a cliff. Fine, I said. Stay. I turned and walked toward the stairs. Where are you going? Mark called out, mocking. To sleep, I said. Roommate. I walked up to the loft, went into my bedroom, and locked the door. Then I pushed the dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. They thought they had won. They thought they had trapped me with squatters' rights and threats. But they didn't know I had the ledger. They didn't know I had the case number. And they didn't know that tomorrow. I wasn't going to Marin. I was going to the one person in town who hated Caldwell more than I did. I pulled out my phone and searched for a name I had seen on the Bright Root unpaid vendors list at the coffee shop, Ridgeline Renovations. Owner, Mike Miller, the man whose signature Jenna had forged, the man they had stiffed. I hit dial. It was time to build an army. The drive to Alder Creek felt like a funeral procession of one. I was driving a clean car, wearing a pressed blazer, and carrying a leather portfolio. But I felt like I was transporting a body. In a way, I was carrying the corpse of my relationship with my sister to a conference room to see if it could be resuscitated, or if we just needed to sign the death certificate. I had scheduled the meeting at Klein and Sato Legal Group for 10 in the morning. I wanted neutral ground. I wanted a heavy oak table between us. I wanted the smell of legal books and the hum of a printer to strip away the emotional manipulation that flourished in the cabin. Jenna could cry and talk about childhood forts. In a law office, tears were just moisture on a liability waiver. I arrived 15 minutes early. Marin Klein met me in the lobby. She looked ready for war, wearing a sharp navy suit and holding a file that was noticeably thicker than it had been 2 days ago. Ready? She asked, her voice low. No, I said honestly. But let's get it over with. We went into the conference room. It was a glass-walled fishbowl overlooking the sleepy main street of the town. I sat on one side of the table, Marin at the head, at 5 minutes to 10. Mark arrived. He walked in as if he were arriving for a board meeting he was chairing. He was wearing a suit, not the casual mountain wear he had been sporting at the cabin, but a charcoal gray business suit that fit him perfectly. He carried a sleek briefcase and a travel mug. He nodded to the receptionist, smiled at Marin, and took the seat opposite me. Alice, he said, inclining his head. Marin, good to see you both. Nice office. Very efficient use of space. He was doing it again. He was sanitizing the crime. He was treating grand larceny like a zoning dispute. Where is Jenna? I asked. She is parking, Mark said, setting his mug down on a coaster. She is having a rough morning. Morning sickness, you know? Stress-induced. He winked. Actually winked. Jenna stumbled in 10 minutes later. She looked like a wreck. Her eyes were swollen, her nose red, and she was wearing a frantic, mismatched outfit, leggings and a formal blouse that was buttoned wrong. She didn't look at me. She slumped into the chair next to Mark, looking small and terrified. "Limitless," Marin said, opening the file. "Let's begin. We are here to discuss the unauthorized access of Alice Foster's financial accounts, the fraudulent opening of a line of credit, and the unauthorized construction work at 124 Pine Creek Road." Mark cleared his throat. "Clarification," he said, raising a finger. "We are here to discuss a family misunderstanding regarding an asset improvement project that has been blown out of proportion." Marin didn't blink. She slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a digital forensic log," she said. "It shows the IP address of the computer used to apply for the loan. It matches the device registered to Jenna Foster. This is a timestamp of the security question verification. It shows the answers were entered manually. This is a copy of the contract with Ridgeline Renovations. The signature is a forgery. It attempts to replicate Alice's signature, but the pen pressure and looping are inconsistent with her known samples." Mark glanced at the papers, unimpressed. "Implied permission," he said smoothly. "Alice and Jenna are sisters. They have a history of shared resources. Jenna had keys to the property. She had the alarm code. In the eyes of the law, that constitutes a level of entrusted access. We argue that Jenna acted as an agent for Alice's interests, attempting to increase the property value during a market upswing. Identity theft is not agency," Marin said, her voice turning razor sharp. "You cannot implied permission a felony. Mark, Alice did not authorize this debt. She did not authorize the work. And she certainly did not authorize you to funnel $40,000 of the credit line into a business account for Brightroot Living." Mark stiffened. "That was a management fee," he said, "for overseeing the renovation." "It was theft," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "You stole my money to pay your vendors." Jenna made a small, choking sound. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder. Squeezing it, it looked comforting, but I saw his knuckles turn white. He was silencing her. "Let's look at the bigger picture," Mark said, leaning forward. "If you pursue this, Alice, you are going to spend years in court. You will spend $50,000 in legal fees to recover $20,000. That is bad math. The smart play, the family play, is to sign the retroactive agreement I offered. We finish the kitchen, we sell the house in the spring, we split the profit, you get your money back, plus interest, no police, no jail." I looked at him. He was so confident. He truly believed that money was the only language I spoke. He thought that if he could just show me the spreadsheet, I would forget that he had violated my life. "I don't want the profit," I said. "I want you out of my house." Marin held up a hand. "Before we discuss eviction, there is a new development." She pulled another document from her file. It was a terrifying shade of pink. "This came in via courier this morning," Marin said. "It is a notice of intent to lien filed by Ridgeline Renovations." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I called Mike. I told him it was fraud." "Exactly," Marin said. "You told him the contract was invalid, which means he panicked. He has invested labor and materials into the property. If the contract is void, he has no way to get paid, so he is filing a mechanic's lien against the deed. He is securing his interest against the asset itself." "He can't do that," I said. "I didn't hire him." "He can," Marin said. "In Colorado, if improvements are made to a property with the owner's knowledge, and you have been there for 3 days while work continued, the contractor has a right to lien. Even if you dispute the contract, the lien clouds the title. You cannot sell, refinance, or modify the mortgage until it is cleared." I stared at the pink paper. It was a trap within a trap. Even in trying to stop the fraud, I had triggered a legal mechanism that punished me. "How do I stop it?" I asked. "We have to bond around it," Marin said. We have to pay the disputed amount, roughly $5,000 for the materials and labor to date, into an escrow account. It shows the court we have the funds, but we are disputing the validity. It stops the lien from attaching to the deed, but it ties up your cash until a judge rules on the fraud. So I have to pay, I said, my voice rising. I have to pay $5,000 of my own money to stop a contractor I didn't hire from taking my house, because my sister stole $20,000 from me? Yes, Marin said softly. That is the reality. I felt a heat rising in my face, a mixture of fury and humiliation. I was bleeding money. I was writing checks to clean up a mess that Mark and Jenna had created. While they sat there in my lawyer's office, drinking free coffee, I pulled out my checkbook. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely write the date. I am writing this check, I said, looking at Jenna. But this comes out of you, one way or another. Jenna looked down at her lap. She was weeping silently. Jenna, Marin said, shifting her focus, you need to understand something. Mark is talking about management fees and implied permission, but the paper trail ends with you. You signed the document. You used the app. If Alice pursues this, Mark walks away as a beneficiary, but you go to prison as the perpetrator. He didn't sign anything. Jenna's head snapped up. She looked at Mark. Mark didn't look at her. He was staring out the window, his jaw set. He didn't know the details, Jenna whispered. It was a weak lie. We have the ledger. Jenna, I said, I saw the notebook in your bag. I know Mark planned the dates. I know he scripted the arguments. Jenna's eyes went wide. She looked terrified. Mark, she said, her voice pleading. Tell them you told me to do it. Mark turned to her slowly. His face was a mask of disappointment. Jenna, honey, I told you to find a solution. I didn't tell you to break the law. I assumed you had Alice's blessing. You told me she was on board. The room went dead silent. It was the bus toss, the moment I had been waiting for. Mark was cutting her loose. He was preserving his own deniability. He was the CEO. She was the rogue employee. Jenna stared at him. Her mouth opened and closed. The betrayal was so absolute, so naked, that it was almost physical. You, she stammered. You drove me to the library to use the computer because our internet was down. You stood over me while I filled out the form. You told me the security answers. I don't recall that, Mark said coldly. Jenna made a sound like a wounded animal. She turned to me. He made me do it, Alice. He told me we were going to lose the house in Denver. He said Caldwell was going to send people to hurt us. Who is Caldwell? Marin asked sharply. He is a lender, Jenna cried. A private lender. We borrowed $50,000 from him 6 months ago to fund the inventory, but the inventory never sold. And the interest? It compounds every week. We owe him $80,000 now. He said if we didn't show proof of assets, he was going to liquidate our situation. So you gave him my house? I asked. He told me to, Jenna screamed. Caldwell told me. He said, You don't have anything, Jenna, but your family does. Use what you can control. He told me to find the person in my life who was the safest bet. He said, Who is the stable one? Who is the one who never checks her credit? Who is the one with the equity? She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were clear. I chose you because you were safe, Alice. You are so responsible. You have perfect credit. You have savings. You were the only resource we had left that hadn't been tapped out. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to use your stability. Just for a month. Just until we could breathe. I sat back in my chair. There it was. The truth. It wasn't that she hated me. It wasn't that she didn't love me. It was worse. She viewed me as a commodity. I was a savings account with a pulse. My responsibility, my hard work, my discipline, all the things I was proud of, were just features of an asset she decided to leverage. Use what you can control. And she couldn't control the market. She couldn't control Mark. She couldn't control Caldwell, but she could control me. She could control the little sister who always wanted to please, who always wanted to help, who always forgave. I felt something snap inside me. It wasn't a loud snap. It was a quiet, clean break, like a dry twig stepping on in a winter forest. The anger evaporated, the guilt evaporated, the need to save her, the need to scream, the need to make her understand. It all just vanished. I looked at Jenna, and I didn't see my sister. I saw a stranger who owed me money. I stood up. "Marin," I said, "process the escrow check. Stop the lien." I turned to Mark and Jenna. "You have 2 hours," I said. "For what?" Mark asked, looking wary. "To get your things out of my cabin," I said. "I have hired a locksmith. He is meeting me there at noon. I have also hired a private security detail to stand guard while the locks are changed. If you are not out by noon, your belongings will be placed on the curb." "You can't do that," Mark blustered. "Squatters' rights?" "I checked," Marin interrupted, smiling a thin, shark-like smile. "Since you have a primary residence in Denver, and you have been at the cabin for less than 30 days, you are guests, revocable at will. Alice is revoking. 2 hours?" I repeated. "And Jenna?" She looked up at me, hopeful. "Do not speak to me," I said. "Do not call me. Do not text me. If you have something to say, say it to Marin. If you come near my property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing." "Alice, please," she sobbed. "I am your sister." "No," I said. "You are a liability." I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. The drive back to the cabin was a blur. I was racing against my own resolve. I knew that if I stopped, if I thought about Jenna's face, I might crumble. So I focused on the logistics. I met the locksmith, a burly man named Dave, in the driveway. A security guard from a private firm in Pine Hollow pulled up 2 minutes later. I had burned another $1,000 hiring them, but I didn't care. I needed physical barriers. Mark and Jenna were scrambling. The arrogance was gone. They were throwing clothes into suitcases, tossing boxes into the back of the Range Rover. The presence of the uniformed security guard, standing silently by the front door with his arms crossed, had stripped Mark of his bluster. He wasn't a slick entrepreneur anymore. He was just a guy getting kicked out. I stood by the fireplace, watching them. I held a clipboard with a document Marin had drafted in the 20 minutes before I left her office. Notice of no trespass communication boundary. When the last bag was in the car, Jenna came back inside. Mark was waiting in the driver's seat, engine idling, refusing to make eye contact with me. Jenna walked up to me. She looked broken. "Alice," she said, "please, we have nowhere to go. We can't go back to Denver. Caldwell." "That is not my problem," I said. I handed her the clipboard. "Sign this. It acknowledges you have vacated the premises and received the notice to cease communication." She stared at the paper. Then she looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. She realized that the tears weren't working. She realized the childhood memories weren't working. She needed a bigger gun. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words hung in the air. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light from the window. "I wasn't just sick this morning," she said, her voice dropping to a hush. "I am 8 weeks along. That is why we needed the money. That is why I was so desperate. I'm doing this for the baby. Alice, your niece or nephew, are you really going to throw a pregnant woman out on the street?" I looked at her stomach. It was flat under her sweater. I looked at her eyes. They were searching mine, looking for the flinch, looking for the crack in the armor. I didn't flinch. I felt nothing. I just stared at her. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Jenna's face shifted. The hope turned to frustration. "God, say something," she snapped. "Sign the paper," I said. "I am lying," she exploded. "Okay? I am not pregnant. I just wanted to see if you still had a heart. You are a robot. Alice, you are cold. You never listen unless it is serious. I had to say something big to get you to even look at me." I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even hurt. It was just confirmation. She would say anything, do anything, invent any reality to get what she wanted. "You are right," I said. "I am cold." I took the clipboard from her hand, realizing she wasn't going to sign it. "Get out." "Fine," she spat. "Enjoy your empty house. Enjoy your money. You are going to die alone, Alice, and you will deserve it." She turned and marched out the door. I watched her get into the Range Rover. She slammed the door. Mark gunned the engine, spraying gravel as he reversed too fast, nearly hitting the locksmith's van. They tore down the driveway and disappeared around the bend. I stood in the silence. "You want me to change the deadbolts now, ma'am?" Dave the locksmith asked from the doorway. "Yes," I said. "All of them, and the window latches." I spent the next 3 hours watching Dave work. I watched the security company install a new keypad. I set a new code, one that had nothing to do with my birthday, or my address, or any number Jenna would know. It was a random string of digits generated by an algorithm. When they left, the cabin was secure. It was mine again. I walked into the kitchen. The hot plate was still there. The smell of burnt cheese lingered faintly. I looked at the hole where the cabinets used to be. I looked at the farmhouse sink sitting in the living room like a sarcophagus. I couldn't stay here, not tonight. The air felt poisoned. Every shadow looked like Mark. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like Jenna. I grabbed my bag. I locked the new deadbolt. I set the new alarm. I drove down the mountain to Alder Creek. I checked into the Pines Motel, a roadside place with neon buzzing in the window and thin towels. I sat on the edge of the bed in room 12. It smelled of bleach and old cigarettes. It was ugly. It was impersonal. It was perfect. I lay back on the stiff mattress and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. For my entire life, I had operated under a single, unwritten constitution. Protect Jenna. She was the wild one, the fragile one, the one who felt things too deeply. I was the rock. I was the safety net. It was a religion I had been inducted into before I could speak. Take care of your sister, tonight. In the silence of a motel room, I realized that I was an atheist. I was done worshiping at the altar of her chaos. I was done sacrificing my peace to buy her forgiveness. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Mark. "You made a big mistake. Caldwell knows you kicked us out. He knows the asset is unsecured. Watch your back." I didn't reply. I blocked the number. Then I blocked Jenna. Then I turned off the phone. I closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. But for the first time in a week, I rested. The worst had happened. The betrayal was complete. The family was broken. And I was still here. The morning sun hit the windshield of my Subaru as I drove back up the mountain. But it offered no warmth. I had spent the night in a motel bed that smelled of industrial detergent, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a feeling of victory that never arrived. I had won. I had reclaimed my house. I had expelled the invaders. But as I turned onto the gravel road leading to my cabin, I felt only a heavy, hollow dread. The security guard I had hired was gone. His shift ended at dawn. The cabin stood silent against the backdrop of the pines. The Range Rover was gone. The silence should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like the silence after a car crash, when the glass has stopped falling and the screaming hasn't started yet. I unlocked the front door with my new key. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy, satisfying thunk. I stepped inside and disarmed the alarm. "Hello?" I called out. Purely out of habit, the house answered with an echo. I walked into the living area. The first thing I noticed was the space. It felt emptier than it should have. I looked toward the kitchen, or the construction zone that used to be a kitchen. The farmhouse sink, the massive porcelain tub that had been sitting in the middle of the living room floor, was gone. I frowned. I walked closer. The boxes of high-end Italian tile that had been stacked against the wall were gone. The uninstalled brass light fixtures, which Jenna had proudly showed me on the first day, were gone. The box containing the expensive pot filler faucet was gone. I stood in the middle of the debris. They hadn't just packed their clothes. They had looted the renovation materials. I walked to the kitchen island, where a solitary piece of paper sat weighed down by a rock from the garden. It was a page torn from the spiral notebook I had seen in Jenna's bag. I picked it up. Jenna's handwriting was jagged, hurried. I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine. Mark says since the credit line was in my name on the application, the materials belong to us. We need to sell them to get back to Denver. Don't try to stop us. It is the least you can do after what you did. I stared at the note. The logic was so twisted, it was almost impressive. She had stolen my identity to open a line of credit, used that fraudulent credit to buy materials, and now claimed ownership of those materials because the fraud was under her name. She had reframed theft as entitlement. In her mind, she wasn't stealing from me. She was liquidating her own hard work of deceiving the bank. I crumpled the note and threw it onto the subfloor. I checked the rest of the house. The guest room was stripped. The linens were gone. My expensive coffee maker was gone. The blender was gone. It was petty. It was vindictive. It was a smash and grab performed by people who felt the world owed them a living. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting a text from Mark. It was a voicemail notification. Unknown number. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. The voice was male. It was deep, calm, and utterly terrifying in its politeness. Ms. Foster, this is Mr. Caldwell. I am calling regarding the outstanding balance on the bridge loan secured by your property at 124 Pine Creek Road. My associate, Randy, tells me there has been some confusion regarding access to the site. I understand you have changed the locks. That is fine. We respect privacy. However, we also respect contracts. The assessment on your cabin came in at $1.2 million. That is more than enough to cover the $80,000 your family owes me. I would prefer to settle this with a check rather than a lien. Please have your brother-in-law call me by close of business today. If he does not, I will assume you are assuming the debt personally. Have a pleasant day. The message ended with a soft click. I stood frozen. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jenna hadn't just lied about the renovation. She hadn't just forged a deed. She had effectively handed a loaded gun to a man who knew how to use it. And then she had run away, leaving me standing in front of the barrel. I assume you are assuming the debt personally. He knew my name. He knew the value of my home. He knew I had changed the locks. He was watching. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, sharp clarity settle over me. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a siege. I got back in my car and drove straight to Maren Klein's office. I didn't even call first. Maren was in a client meeting, but when her receptionist saw my face, she pulled Maren out. We went into her office and I played the voicemail on speaker. Maren listened, her face unreadable. When it finished, she leaned back in her chair and took a slow breath. Okay, she said. That is a threat. It is a sophisticated threat. But it is a threat. He said he would lien the house, I said. Can he do that? Not legally, Maren said. He has no valid contract with you. The deed Jenna showed him was a forgery. If he tries to file a lien, we will contest it immediately and file a countersuit for slander of title. But men like Caldwell don't usually rely on the court system. Alice, they rely on fear. He is trying to scare you into paying Mark's debt. It is working, I admitted. I am scared. Good, Maren said. Fear makes you careful. Now we are going to formalize everything. We are going to build a wall of paper so high that neither Mark, nor Jenna, nor Caldwell can climb over it. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. First, we are sending a cease and desist letter to Caldwell Capital Solutions, informing them that the debt is disputed, the collateral was offered fraudulently, and any attempt to contact you or enter your property will be met with immediate police action. We are copying the district attorney on that letter. He won't care about a letter, I said. He will care if the DA is watching, Maren countered. Hard money lenders operate in a gray area. They hate scrutiny. If we shine a spotlight on him, he will likely cut his losses and go after Mark directly. Mark is the easier target. And Jenna? I asked. Marin looked at me. We need to file for a permanent restraining order, and we need to fully cooperate with the bank's fraud investigation. That means you have to sign an affidavit swearing that Jenna stole the funds. No more protecting her. If the bank goes after her, you stay out of the way. I nodded. Draft it. I spent the next 2 hours signing documents. My hand shook, not from fear of the court, but from the crushing weight of grief. Every signature felt like I was shoveling dirt onto a grave. Restraining order, affidavit of forgery, notice of intent to prosecute. These were the final rites of my sisterhood. You are doing the right thing, Marin said softly as I signed the last page. It doesn't feel like the right thing, I said. It feels like amputation. Sometimes, Marin said, capping her pen, you have to cut off the limb to save the body. The next 2 weeks were a blur of bureaucracy and tension. I stayed at the motel for 3 more nights, too afraid to sleep at the cabin until the new security system was fully integrated with a direct line to the sheriff's department. The bank's investigation was thorough and invasive. I had to surrender my laptop, my phone records, and years of financial history to prove I wasn't a co-conspirator. It was humiliating. I had to explain to strangers why my sister knew my security questions. I had to detail the history of our family trauma to a fraud analyst named Kevin, who just wanted to check boxes on a form. But in the end, the facts won. The digital footprint was undeniable. The IP logs, the recovery email, the forged signatures. It all painted a clear picture of sophisticated identity theft. 10 days after I filed the report, I received a call from the bank. Ms. Foster, the investigator said, we have concluded our primary review. We have determined that the home equity line of credit was opened without your authorization. We are closing the account and reversing the liability. The $20,000 is no longer your debt. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a month. Thank you. However, the investigator added, because the funds were transferred to an account belonging to Jenna Foster, and because you have identified her as the perpetrator, we will be turning this file over to federal law enforcement for prosecution. You may be subpoenaed to testify. I understand, I said. And regarding the mechanic's lien, Marin told me later that afternoon, Ridgeline Renovations has agreed to settle. Mike Miller isn't happy, but he accepted the escrow payment for the materials and labor already expended. He is withdrawing the lien action. He knows the contract is void, and he doesn't want to get dragged into a fraud trial. It was over. The legal threat was neutralized. The financial bleeding had stopped. But the silence was louder than ever. I moved back into the cabin on a Tuesday. The place felt different. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a fortress. I checked the cameras 5 times an hour. I jumped at the sound of the wind. Caldwell never called back. Marin was right. Once the lawyers and the police were involved, I became too hot to touch. He would look for easier prey. He would look for Mark. I was sitting on the deck, staring at the tree line, when my phone chimed. It was a text message. New number. Area code 720, Denver. You happy now? We lost the house. We are staying in a motel in Aurora. Jenna hasn't stopped crying for 3 days. You destroyed this family over money. I hope you feel good about yourself. She is not safe, Alice, and it is your fault. I stared at the screen. The words were designed to hook into my old programming. Your fault. Destroyed the family. Not safe. Mark was doing what he always did, shifting the consequences of his actions onto the person who had finally set a boundary. He had gambled their safety on a fraud, and now that the gamble had failed, he wanted me to feel responsible for the losses. I typed a reply. Do not contact me again. This number is being forwarded to my attorney and the police. I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I didn't feel guilty. I felt a strange, cold anger. He wasn't worried about Jenna's safety. He was angry that his shield had stopped working. He was angry that I had stopped being a resource and started being a person. 2 days later, I got the email. It was from Jenna, not from her main account, but from a new one she must have just created. Subject. No subject. I am back in Grand Junction. I am staying with heavyset Karen from high school. Mark stayed in Denver to deal with the business fallout. I guess we are taking a break. I just wanted to say, I didn't mean to hurt you. I really didn't. I just didn't know what else to do. We were drowning. Allie, I thought if I could just borrow your stability for a little while, I could save us. I am sorry you didn't see it that way. I read the email 3 times. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know what else to do. I am sorry you didn't see it that way. It wasn't an apology. An apology requires taking responsibility. An apology says, I was wrong. This was a confession of helplessness. She was positioning herself as a victim of circumstance, a person who had no choice but to steal, to lie, to betray. She was sorry for the outcome, not the action. She was sorry I had reacted poorly, not that she had acted wrongly. She was still the girl who built forts to hide from the thunder. She still believed that if she was scared enough, the rules didn't apply to her. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. I moved the email to a folder I had named Evidence, and I closed the laptop. I walked into the kitchen. It was late afternoon, and the sun was streaming through the windows, illuminating the raw, unfinished space. The drywall was still torn open, exposing the wooden studs and the insulation. The floor was scarred where the cabinets had been ripped out. The plumbing pipes stuck out of the wall like severed arteries. It was ugly. It was broken. But it was honest. For years, I had treated this cabin, and my life, as a perfectly curated exhibit. I had hidden the cracks. I had pretended that my family was complicated but loving. I had pretended that my success could compensate for their chaos. I had built a beautiful kitchen over a rotten foundation. Jenna had torn it all down. She had stripped it back to the frame. I ran my hand over the rough wood of a stud. I was alone. My sister was a stranger living in a guest room in our hometown. My brother-in-law was a con artist, likely hiding from a loan shark. My parents were gone. The silence in the cabin was absolute. But as I stood there, I realized that for the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was clean. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the frantic phone call. I wasn't waiting to be asked for money. I wasn't waiting to be the savior. The worst had happened. The explosion had gone off, and I was still standing. I looked at the space where the sink used to be. I am not putting in a farmhouse sink, I said aloud. The sound of my own voice startled me, but it felt good. I was going to rebuild, but I wasn't going to restore it to what it was. I was going to build something different, something stronger, something that didn't have room for guests who stole. I picked up a broom and started to sweep the dust. The rhythm of the bristles against the subfloor was steady and calming. It was lonely work, rebuilding, but at least the materials were mine, at least the design was mine, and this time, I would be the only one holding the keys. Thank you for listening to this story. Family betrayal is a unique kind of pain. It leaves scars that don't always show, but they change the way we move through the world. Alice's journey was about realizing that sometimes keeping the peace is just a fancy way of accepting abuse. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Alice was too harsh in the end? Or did she do exactly what she needed to do to survive? And have you ever had to draw a hard line with a family member to protect yourself? Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, drama, and the complexities of the human heart. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm.